Good evening, this is Brown at IF Brown, and tonight we are going to be talking about Arion, Lord of Atlantis, issues 17 through 24. So when last we left off, Arion had disclosed to Lady Cheyenne and Mara that he had been in constant internal battle with the shade of his brother Garn, and Garn was the evil sorcerer who had been the thorn in Arion's side for quite some time within the span of these previous issues. But he had told her that the discovery of the hilt of Garn's sword had basically emboldened Garn's attacks on him, as it were. And so they go to the only person that he could think of that might be able to exorcise this demonic foe, as it were. And that person is the tribal shaman of Wynde's people. And Wyynde, as you'll recall, had just gotten married to a woman named Fawn Dancer and had become the leader of his people. And so when Arion and his companions, Lady Cheyenne and Mara, make it into the city, there's a bit of an initial conflict between Mara and Wyynde, because Mara, the young girl who was a changeling, had a bit of a romantic interest in Wyynde, but when she realizes that Wyynde has in fact gotten married, she's more than a little distraught, and so Lady Cheyenne has to go after her and sort of comfort her, calm her down, while Arion, who incidentally has refused to sleep for several days, a couple of weeks even, because he's convinced that one moment's bit of respite will further allow Garn to break free from him. Arion is in a very weakened state, both physically and psychologically, and you could even say spiritually as well. So it turns out that the shaman of Wynde's people was aware that Arion would be coming to them for her help, and so Wyynde helps Arion to get to her and stands guard over this ritual. And the tribal shaman explains that she basically she and Arion have to work together to exorcise Garn's spirit from Arion's body, because if Garn is given just a little bit of free reign, it'll be his spirit that controls the separation between the two. And if that happens, then Garn's evil will be magnified 10 times fold. I'm just going out with a figure there, but basically things will get bad if Garn's in control. And so the ceremony begins, but those of you who are well versed in horror movies are probably aware that whenever an exorcism is attempted, very seldom does it ever go well. And in this case, this fantastical setting of fantasy and science fiction, this exorcism does not go well at all. And in fact, Garn had been building up his faculties, if you will, within this sort of psychic prison that Arion had put him in. And so when Arion basically goes within himself to try and defeat Garn, Garn just makes mincemeat of the poor mage. And so mind you, Arion is almost without any sort of magical powers. His sorcerer's abilities have been stripped from him, and any powers he has are very limited. Basically, he's got a bit of a radar almost, to pick up, say if magic's being used, or he's able to do conjurer's tricks, illusions, but nothing like, he was able to do at the beginning of the series. And he's forced to, rely on making contact with the spirit of his deceased father, Calcula, for anything resembling that level of magic. But even Arion, just using simple, illusionist tricks, gives Garn even more power to break free from him and also control the separation. And despite the shaman's best efforts, she's unfortunately fails to help Arion, and Arion fails himself because ultimately he's the only one who could have, really defeated Garn in this, psychic battle. And so, Garn breaks free from Arion and, runs roughshod, and, his malevolence just seeps through the populace of the city of Wynde's people. And, there's like chaos, people go insane, try and kill each other. Lady Cheyenne, ends up being attacked by a sort of shadow, a pure shadow demon, and just barely gets out of it with her life. And Mara, once again, finds that being at the point of death is basically kind of a key to transform into the creatures that she's been able to manifest as with her changeling abilities. And when a horde of possessed citizens nearly kill her, that's when she's able to turn into a dragon and fly away to try and find Wyynde and Arion and Lady Cheyenne. But unfortunately, Garn's evil just decimates this, city, and the civilians are either possessed by Garn's evil and led to attack Arion's allies, or Garn has his way with them and mutates them, into something resembling the demi-humans from issue 16. And so you've got two different types of hordes of, possessed people that are trying to, kill Arion and his companions. And the shaman, she uses her magic to try and buy Arion and them some time. And while she puts up a fight, unfortunately, she's, killed by some of the, townspeople who have been turned into demi-humans because they've taken full leave of their senses. And so basically there's a bit of a back and forth between Arion and Garn, because Arion is able to actually defeat Garn through resorting to summoning eldritch deities, if you will. And unfortunately, though, Garn, being at full sorcerer's powers, is able to do some summoning of his own. And the demon who we last saw several issues ago, who Garn had initially summoned to attack Arion and his companions in the Dark World, also the one who was behind the corruption of Garn and Arion's mother, makes a return. And so the battlefield is just total chaos. And what ultimately ends up happening is, along with the townspeople, getting, or I should say the city's people getting possessed and mutated, Garn ends up flooding it, which is very much of a foreshadowing of what eventually happened to the real Atlantis. I'm sure is no coincidence. But anyway, Garn floods the city, and Arion is able to defeat Garn eventually through some last minute cunning and magic summoning of his with his father's the shade of his father, who is able to provide some form of assistance. But unfortunately, just about everyone in the city is dead, and the only survivors pertaining to Wyynde and his people are his little brother Nightfire, as well as his bride Fondancer. But unfortunately for her, she was one of the victims of Garn's transformation spells. Basically, she's been mutated into a sort of mer creature, like demi-human. And I mean, she's still, I mean, to me at least, I mean, she still, looked beautiful, but she's no longer the human that she once was. And so she actually, helps Arion and his companions to get to safety, but she bids a tearful goodbye to Wyynde, basically saying that I'm no longer the woman that you fell in love with, and this is not my life anymore. And she bids a farewell, but in the process, but before that though, before she says goodbye to Wyynde and Arion's people, they have to contend with a sea god that makes an appearance, sort of this greenish bearded looking humanoid, who has for some reason developed a lust for her, for Fondancer in her new mutated form. And so Arion once again has to resort to cunning and his knowledge of archaic sorcery, and basically to be able to reach out to the shade of his father to provide him some assistance and ultimately defeat this sea god. And after which Fondancer is truly able to move on, and Wyynde is able to move on as well, however very reluctantly. And so not only has Wyynde lost all of his people, but he's lost the woman that he's fell in love with. And so shortly after that, they end up coming across a group of pirates led by a man named Bloodmore, who's a bit of a rogue anti-hero, I guess. And Arion eventually defeats him in combat, and as a result, Bloodmore offers Arion and his companions a spot on their ship, the Black Unicorn, as they make their way into town. And during all this, it turns out that Garn had been turned into a statue of pure gold through magical means of another of a divine entity that Arion had been able to summon in his battle with him, and which is how he was able to defeat him. Unfortunately, though, it was after the fact of Garn killing Wynn's people. But they make the mistake of bringing the golden statue that Garn has been turned into with them. And once they get into this port to make repairs on the ship, which has been attacked by sea monsters, the crew of the Black Unicorn, members of the crew, have kind of gone rogue against Bloodmore, and what they're intending to do is to melt down the golden statue of Garn, and make enough money to essentially hire out some mercenaries to overthrow Bloodmore. But unfortunately, this statue being Garn, well, this attempt to turn him into pieces of gold backfires and ends up releasing him. And at this point, Garn tries for, I guess, round 3 against Arion, and basically tells him that I'm going to attack Atlantis, and more or less challenges Arion to come to Atlantis to try and stop him, even though he's in a very weakened state, power-wise. And so Arion and his companions, they ultimately make it to Atlantis, but they find, though, that there's a new high mage. It's Garn. Yeah, so it turns out that the king of Atlantis, has taken Garn in, and claims that Garn has confessed his evil to him and apologized and asked for forgiveness. And the king claims that Garn's changed his ways, and Garn seems very apologetic. And Arion, much to his shock, can read no evil from him. He's able to cast this minor spell to pick up any sort of malevolence in the area, and there's nothing evil coming from Garn they can pick up on. But as the days pass, it's obvious that Garn is enacting some final revenge scheme against Arion, because all the people of Atlantis are turning against Arion and are embracing Garn, and basically doing a full-on 180, from considering Arion, the hero and savior of Atlantis. And so one of the things that ends up happening is there's been an arena that's been constructed, and due to Garn's manipulations, fights to the death are now encouraged. And Wyynde is one, and Lady Cheyenne are some of the people who have fallen under Garn's sway. And Wyynde ends up starting a fight with Arion, and the two of them end up in the arena, and Wyynde ends up nearly killing Arion. But when he asks Garn if should he kill Arion or let him live, Garn lets Arion live, because it turns out that he's wanting Arion to suffer. He's wanting Arion to basically be broken, both in terms of power as well as mentally, because the people of Atlantis once looked up to him, but now he's wanting them to disown Arion and to hate him. It's basically spit at the sound of his name. And so Arion, the only way he's able to defeat Garn this time, despite that he's extremely limited in power, is he has to break into the building that used to be his own sanctuary, if you will, where his memorabilia and magical paraphernalia were housed. And that's where the shards of summoning that his father was connected to are housed. And so he's able to break into his own house, as it were, through violence against some of the guards that have been swayed by Garn. But Arion is able to make it into his own house, and used one of the shards to summon the shade of his father to help him. And his father's reminding him that the number of shards that you have are decreasing, and I can only help you a few more times. And Arion says, I have to risk it. I need your help. I need to be as powerful as I once was if I want to defeat Garn, even if it's only for a short time. And because this time I know what I have to do. Well, I should have done the first time around. And ultimately, his father ends up helping him and giving him the power he needs. So for a short amount of time, Arion is as powerful as he once was, and he uses that power to take on Garn in a final battle. And this time Arion does what arguably he should have done. He kills Garn. Namely, he drowns him, albeit through some magical means and capabilities. But when that happens, the shades of his father and his mother, the one who had become corrupted, the mother who had become corrupted, she curses the shade of the father, for helping Arion to kill the son that she loved. And so, the father's shade, is remorseful, but he's saying, hey, this had to be done, and I'll never be able to forgive myself, but it had to be done. And Arion's left standing over the dead body of his brother. And so that's where this particular arc ends. And I gotta say that the funny thing is, even though this was, I think, it was about 7 or 8 issues long, this particular arc, a lot happened, but it was done at such a pace to where, you know, trying to, talk about it, um, I feel like I'm able to do it in a much more, quicker manner than I usually am with, say, the other issues I've discussed with of Arion. And I think part of that was because the way the previous issues were written, it was done in such a way to where even though there were less issues in, whichever arc I was talking about, it was like the writers or the creative team was tapping into, not only Arion's life, but also just into, the life of Atlantis in general, the world of Atlantis. And so there was like this world building going on. But this time around, even though there are more issues that are in this arc, there was more of a focus on straight up, good versus evil. And so in some ways, I appreciated that. But at the same time, though, I feel like this particular arc was kind of missing something, because on one hand, you certainly see just how, damaging and powerful chaotic sorcery can be, or I should say sorcery being used for evil can be, because Garn literally, at full power, just wipes out a whole city of people, and that was one of the things that I have mixed feelings on, because on one hand, I appreciate the fact that I can appreciate the fact that the creative team went for kind of a go for broke attitude and kill them all type of thing, or at least anyone can die, and I can appreciate that level of realism within a fictional setting. But at the same time, I feel like it would have been more effective, at least as far as empathizing with the plight of especially Wyynde, the character of Wyynde, is because I feel like it would have been more effective if they had built that up. Like, say, for instance, if we had a few more issues that dealt with Wyynde, in, say, the day-to-day life responsibilities of ruling his people. Like, say, if we had gotten to know the society a bit more than we already did, because the glimpses we got of Wynn's people and their city and their culture were very fascinating, but we just got a couple of glimpses. We knew the basics, but we didn't get to become attached to but just a few characters. The female shaman, being one of them. But other than that, though, there were a lot of people that were in the picture, but we didn't really get to, spend time enough to develop a connection with them. It seemed like Wyynde had just gotten married to Fawn Dancer, and then next thing you know, the Garn, ruins everything by literally, destroying the city and transforming, Fawn Dancer into a monster. So, it's like, he really can't, poor guy can't catch a break. But I feel like that bit of that sort of horror and tragedy would have been more effective if we had gotten to know more about Garn's people, or if we had just seen Garn interacting more with his people, because there was, the whole idea of him trying to reconnect, with, a life that he had willingly given up initially. And it was touched upon ever so slightly, but in this particular arc, not so much. And so I think that they went a little too quickly in terms of how soon they wiped out his people, and that kind of leads into the other issue I had with this particular arc. Garn has definitely been Arion's arch nemesis since the beginning of the series. Technically since I believe issues 3 and 4 maybe. or it was 5. Anyway, it was the early issues of Arion in which Garn was introduced, and he's definitely been, the thorn in Arion's side and has been his arch nemesis through and through. That cannot be denied. But I think that in this particular arc, they relied too much on Garn to be the driving point, or at least the main cause of Arion's misfortune, and that of his companions as well. Because within the span of, I believe it was 8 issues, Garn is defeated and resurrected like at least 2 times, and so basically it's kind of like too much too soon. If they had maybe had another encounter with Garn later on in the series, then his final defeat would have been that much more powerful. But because we saw him so soon after the first time within this arc that he's defeated, it's like can't this guy just take a breather, or can't he just go be in a coma or something? I don't know. But anyway, I just like, I appreciate how powerful that they made Garn. I appreciate the fact that he was as deadly as he was, but I just think that if they had devoted more time to certain plot lines, I think that his gradual defeat of Arion and his corruption and ultimate destruction of Wyynde's people would have been that much more powerful. Because don't get me wrong, it's obviously a great display of his power in terms of just how devastating it is, but it happens within the span of 1 or 2 issues. And so it's just, like I said, I appreciate the realism, the real aspect of anyone can die, but I just think it was just like boom, 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 and it didn't really have as much staying power as it could have had. And also, the other thing tied to that is, Wyynde is obviously affected by the tragedy that's befallen his people, but at the same time, there's not really much development in terms of Arion's part in it. There's lip service paid to it, like he feels remorseful about his part in the death of Wyynde's people, because he's the one who's kept Garn trapped within him, and he's the one who came to their city to try and have the exorcism done. But if he had just killed Garn the first time, instead of just being guilt-stricken by attacking his long-lost brother and trying to keep him alive in some way, none of this would have happened. So there's a bit of lip service paid, but it's just kind of like, oh gee, that's too bad. Oh well, let's go do this adventure, and I really think that they should have focused more on the moral and ethical ramifications of Arion's decision to try and contain his brother within himself, and the consequence of the deaths of the consequence of Wyynde losing his people as a result. And it would have been interesting to see Wyynde sort of view Arion in a bit of an antagonistic light, instead of just going with the tried and true loyal companion route that he's been on since the beginning of the series. Because the fact that Arion is partially responsible for the loss of his people, that's not something that I think most people would be able to just shake off, especially if they were friends with Arion. And I just had mixed feelings about how it was handled. Now I will say that I did like how we kind of got a glimpse into, say, some of the natural enemies, or actually, I guess some of the more fantastical dangers of the world, like with the sea monsters attacking the crew of the Black Unicorn. And I will say that I kind of liked Bloodmore's character. I just feel like that with him, it was kind of a been there, done that, roguish pirate type who he's a bad guy, but he's not quite a bad guy. He's sort of charming and all that. I mean, he wasn't a bad character, but at the same time, he just, he was there in the short term, and there could have been, a couple of stories devoted to, Arion and his companions, serving on Bloodmore's crew, and having a few adventures of their own. But instead, it's just a couple an issue here and there. They're in port, and then they say adios, and that's it. I mean, and you have that, and then you have that trip to Atlantis, and I think it's kind of like the development with the destruction of Wyynde's people. I mean, the friendship with Bloodmore could have been better developed if there had been a few more issues to focus on that, and we could have gotten a few more adventure stories of sailing the high seas, because the brief glimpse we got of Arion and his friends as pirates was actually pretty cool, but just not enough time was given to further develop that. But I will say that I liked how the arc ended, because I mean, you see Garn as most psychologically insidious, because I mean, we saw just how devastating he could be when he's just letting his magic run rampant. But this was like the time where he uses his magic in a more subtle way, and by gradually turning the people of Arion's own home against him. And so I did like how you kind of see Arion being put through the ringer, but on a more psychological level. I mean, because we got a glimpse of that when he's been earlier, when he was trying to keep Garn contained within himself, but it was just kind of the way he was written, it was just kind of like a oh me, oh my, type of deal. It's like, dude, you sound like you're in a bad soap opera. But this time around, the last couple of issues in this arc, I mean, you see, Arion, being shaken on a very human level, because you've seen, movies and stuff where a protagonist doesn't know what the heck is going on, and everyone else seems to hate them for some reason, and they're trying to figure out what's happening, and it's that kind of tension, and I feel like that kind of tension was kind of missing from this arc up until the last couple of issues. And so when Arion and Garn have their final battle, I mean, you ultimately see Garn, revealed as, the ultimate, nemesis, for Arion in his existence thus far. And you see just how, cunning and not only powerful, but as, cunning, as he can be. And so when Arion finally, kills him, on one hand, there's a bit of a, yes, type of feeling, but on the other hand, there's a bit of frustration, because, I mean, Arion really should have killed him the first time around. I mean, yes, I mean, they could have brought Garn back to cause some trouble somehow. I mean, this being involving magic and all, but, he really, you really feel frustration with, Arion as a character because of the dumbest decision he made to try and keep Garn alive somehow, by absorbing his essence within himself. But, so it's like, I'm glad that he finally, did what he had to do and killed Garn, but I just wish that he had done it sooner, because, I mean, I guess it's a sign of good writing that, I was kind of, bummed out that, Wyynde's people were, wiped out of the picture. I mean, yes, there's fictional characters, but there was enough time that was, given to, developing their culture somewhat, to where you felt like it was a passing of a race of people. And so there was a definite tragedy that could have been prevented had Arion taken more responsibility. But I will say, though, that I like the irony, or I guess you could say the poetic justice, of Arion killing Garn by drowning him, thus mirroring the way he ultimately, killed Wyynde's people. And so it also, once again, kind of a foreshadowing of what ends up happening to Atlantis. So I'm going to go ahead and give issues 17 through 24, 3 out of 5 stars. I mean, it was a decent arc. I just wish that they had developed certain aspects a little bit more, so that way there'd be a little more emotional staying power when certain intense things happened. And I feel like that the most powerful moments that for me at least that resonated on an emotional level were only at the end of the arc, aka the last 2 issues. And you would think that the issues earlier on in the arc dealing with the death of Wyynde's people would have been more emotionally memorable, but just because of how fast it was done, it was like, I mean, yeah, it's sad, but at the same time, you don't really think twice about it, just the way it's handled, which is kind of I guess it's a sign of writing that's not as good as it could have been. But they did pick it up with the last few issues, though, so I will give them that. So it at least ended on the type of quality of writing that it should have had in the first place, at least within this arc goes. But so yeah, so it was decent. Could have been better, but it was a good way to at least end Garn's storyline. So anyway, though, I'll go ahead and show you all the covers here. So this is issue 17. Issue 18. '19. 20. 21. This is probably my favorite cover right here. And let's see, 22. And this is actually the debut issue of the new series artist, Cara, Sherman-Tereno. And she took over the art duties on this issue, even though Duursema still did the cover art. And Duursema came back to do issue 23, both the penciling and inking on the inside. But after this issue, though, Tereno would take over as the regular artist on the series. And so this is issue 24, where Arion and Garn have their final showdown. But anyway, though, thank you for taking the time to check out my review. Y'all got any questions, comments, let me know. And if you like what you see here, please hit that like button and subscribe. But y'all have a good night. Take care. Goodbye.